Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. He says, turn up the heat, and it's all about the beat. That finding racism is a sport and American politics is too often juice and cookies. He's John McWhorter, an iconoclast who provides provocative viewpoints supported by scholarly savvy. Dr. McWhorter is a Ph.D. in linguistics from Stanford, the author of 10 and now 11 books, including the best-selling and influential Losing the Race. He's written scores of op-eds and think pieces on race and culture and is a fixture on TV news and radio commentary. His newest book is All About the Beat, Why Hip-Hop Can't Save Black America. Welcome back, John.
Thank you, Doug. Always a pleasure, except it's early.
Right. The last time we talked was 2 years ago, and a lot has changed, hasn't it? 2 years ago, you wrote that Obama wouldn't exist if he were white. What's changed in him, in you, in us?
Well, I still say, although I wrote that 2 years ago, we didn't know Obama as well then. The fact that he got so much attention then when so little was known about him was due in a crucial way to the color of his skin. That doesn't mean that he isn't a brilliant person. That doesn't mean that I don't support him. But the fact is that if that exact same person were white, in the piece you mentioned, I suppose his name was Barrett O'Leary, right, we would not have heard of him now. Maybe in 5 or 6 years, but we wouldn't have heard of him now. And I think it's because, in a way, America is very quickly getting past race, because people think that his blackness is something interesting. They think it's cool. And I don't think, I know, and many white people have told me, that if you were white in this country, then giving a vote to Barack Obama partly just feels good because it seems like you're doing the right thing, just like when you recycle. And so all of that was true. Importantly, though, and I have to say this because that line where I write about his being kind of an affirmative action candidate, I wrote that 2 years ago now when we didn't know him as well. He was just kind of a picture on the magazine covers. Now, a lot more has happened.
What do you know now that persuades you that he's the real deal or our real deal?
Various things. One of them is that I like the way he tries to split the difference, because I call that constructive politics. 2, he's interested in some things that will have a major impact on the black community if they're done right, such as working on re-entry programs into society,
like Second Chance
ex-cons, exactly, and bringing fathers back into contact with their kids if they've lost contact.
We'll talk about the Father's Day
Big stuff. And he's also shown that he can handle himself politically, which I like a lot. And there's something else I didn't know about him 2 years ago, which is that he has a way of talking, or he can slide into a way of talking, which connects with young black people and young Americans in general. That preacherly cadence that he pulls
talk
off.
about the oratorical style, if you will.
Oh, it's amazing. That it's a drug, and I think it's in a good way. When he talks in the short sentences with the certain kind of drop off at the ends of the phrases, sounds a little bit like the church, sometimes a little bit like the street. That's not only the voice of the black church that speaks to, I think, most black Americans, but especially now, you know, the grand old statistic, 70% of hip-hop's listeners are white. What that means is that if you are a white person about under 30, you know as much about hip-hop often as black kids do.
Oh, absolutely.
And so for those people, the black voice is the lingua franca. And so that way he talks, and I think people often miss how important the way people talk is. That way he talks is narcotic. It could help change the country.
In what way? In a sense that that thesis almost contradicts, if I may, the thesis in All About the Beat. You're talking in this, you criticize hip-hop as being a style, and that the style itself sometimes gives the illusion of solidity and substantiality.
Almost always does, yes.
But in a sense, Obama's style is what is attractive, and there's even those of us who have, have voted, gone into the voting booth for him, see a lack of substance, if you will. And what struck me about your writing about hip-hop and your discussion of Obama is that, on one sense, the style works, and you see it as socially constructed, but in the other case, the style doesn't work, and it's not socially constructive.
Mm-hmm. Very good question. The difference is that with Obama, certainly you get a style, and then there is potentially something important behind it. Second Chance Act, the Family Act, et cetera. And many people have said that he was a hollow suit. You know, Doug, I'm not convinced. I think that most Americans, like most human beings, don't happen to be deeply interested in politics, and so it's easy to say he's an empty suit. Sometimes, even if you're a pundit or a writer, all you have to do is look, and he discusses substantial things in his speeches where he does it. You can look on the website. It's not hard. He has explained what he is, but, of course, what sticks in your mind is the oratory. With hip-hop, you get a way of speaking, a way of communicating that is very narcotic, including, to me, I like beats, I like listening to people being angry, but then there's this idea that they're saying something important, and people will tell you, no, it's not all about the, I don't know if we're allowed to use curse words, but anybody knows the one that I would want to use, referring to women. And then the violence, but then
bitches and hoes.
Well, I'll let you say it. Somehow, if I say it, it sounds more severe. And so then there is the political hip hop, and it's conscious, and it's saying some good things. And it seems to me that most of the good things it's saying are fight the powers that be, and of course, it was put exactly that way a very long time ago. Listen to a conscious rapper from last week, and it's still all about America has to turn upside down. America is set against black men because the playing field isn't completely level. Then we must be ready for apocalypse, and in the meantime, that means that black criminals must be understood. It's all there. It's not said directly. If it isn't said directly, it's in the implication. And there's nothing behind that. And so someone says that, and you're snapping your fingers, and you're thinking how deep it is to listen to a formerly dispossessed young black man having his say. Okay, then turn it off, sit down in your chair. What are you going to do? What's going to actually happen in Washington that has anything to do with what some of these people are saying? I don't see the connection. So there's where I find that it's just style over substance instead of style as a herald for substance.
Okay, and in Obama's case, you see it as a herald for substance, as well as you just argued, that there is substance there. Okay, does his candidacy signal that in some way we are beyond race? You've called this a momentous moment. Is it? And how is it?
It really is. And I sometimes wish, no, I can't put it that way. There is a historical perspective that one must have. You have to roll the tape back. And I know that a year and a half ago, I would be talking to, I have to stop talking about middle-aged black people because I'm 42, black people in their late middle age. And I'd say, well, aren't you excited?
Wait a minute, we're not going to define that because I think I might fit into at least the age category, if not the color category. Go ahead.
But I would be speaking to my elders.
Okay.
Not the elderly,
Go ahead.
but people, maybe a generation. And I'd say, here's Barack Obama. Do you realize what's about to happen? I could just kind of feel it. I was just going on my gut. And they'd say, oh, no, you just don't know. And it was clear that these people, smart, concerned people, thought that somehow, if he's not going to be shot, that somehow just him being black is just going to keep him from getting very far. And look what happened ever since Iowa. Here's this person. He's black. We're talking about this first lady, and she's being kicked, a possible first lady. She's being kicked around in the media. A black American woman? You wouldn't have even expected this 4 years ago. It's really a sign that something has happened. And of course, there are all the people who are saying, well, he's the kind of black person that white people like. Well, big surprise. Of course he is. Still, he is a black person, and his wife is even blacker. And there can be all sorts of questions about what I mean by that. Everybody knows exactly what I mean by that.
Well, tell the viewers what you mean, because you've written pieces on blackness.
You've got it all in there.
And some people are blacker than others, and you name names.
Yeah. The point being that there is a cultural repertoire which you could say is what black culture is. It is various things. It could be hundreds of things. And there are some individuals who partake of more of those things than others.
What are these things? So what are sort of the keynote characteristics of black culture as you see it? Obviously, it's a broad generalization.
It's a generalization. And I wrote this. Barack Obama was not the reason that I was speculating about this. It was a larger point. But there is a black dialect, which is there. It's not only the sound, but it's also what became known as Ebonics 12 years ago. There is musical taste, that's part of it. There are facial demeanors and aspects of bodily carriage. There are culinary tastes. There are traditions such as traditions within the church, or there is celebration of Kwanzaa or Juneteenth.
Right,
all those
which you're
sorts
not
of things.
happy with.
And so you've got every single thing. Yeah, that was just last week.
Yes.
And so I'm not unhappy with Juneteenth. It just has never moved me much.
Explain Juneteenth and what your objection
Juneteenth is a celebration roughly of when slaves were freed. And I don't have anything against Juneteenth. I've just always thought I would rather celebrate the passage of the Civil Rights Act because black people were more directly involved in obtaining that. But the point about black culture was just that there are some people, therefore, who are blacker than others, and that is okay. And that doesn't mean that there aren't some white people who exhibit some of those traits. That doesn't mean that if you don't exhibit enough of those traits, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
But it's
there's something there.
Like Albanian culture. And yeah, I wrote that piece and the response was bizarre. You know, there's just times when you think I either didn't communicate that properly or...
What was the nature of the response?
A lot of people thought that I, of all people, was reading them out of the black race, or a lot of people seemed to think that I was creating a stereotype rather than just describing some things which, if anything, I thought were good. I mentioned fried chicken because it does have a heritage in African American culture.
Well, that could get you in trouble.
And apparently that was considered
watermelon, I
wrong.
hope.
Yeah, I don't know about watermelon. You know, I've never researched why there was that one. But with the chicken, it's real. I like fried chicken.
Me too.
And so,
but I don't like cold Popeyes.
Cold. That's from, what's Cold Popeyes from? Obama recently, Cold Popeyes.
Right.
I do.
The Father's Day speech.
You know, the Father's Day speech. Cold Popeyes, I have a relationship to fried chicken that my white friends do not, even if they like it. And that's because there is a black culture, and contrary to what some people might think I was raised
Where
in.
did you grow up?
Philadelphia.
And did you grow up in a racially segregated? Mixed.
Not segregated.
Okay.
I lived in a very mixed neighborhood. My friends were the black ones. There was no racial balkanization, but that's who I knew. My best friend still is the black guy who lived across the driveway. Went to Montessori schools where white was the main thing.
My wife taught.
Did she really?
She's a Montessori teacher.
The pink tower and the brown stairs?
Excuse me.
That's how I learned.
And the sandpaper letters, come on.
Yes. Oh,
and
what a
geese
nostalgia.
And the sounds for the alphabet. No, let's not go there.
You just took me back like in Ratatouille when the guy eats the food.
Yes.
The sandpaper letters.
Well, that's exactly
right. That's how I learned how to write.
Excuse me.
So that's how I learned. And so I had one foot in one and one foot in the other. But, you know, I had a black family. I did not have a white parent or anything like that. And so... yes, there was chicken and all sorts of other things. And so I wrote that, and it was interesting that was considered controversial because I just thought it was kind of ordinary. We've gone in several layers. I forget what we're talking about now, but
Go
Obama.
ahead. Keep going.
Obama's wife, et cetera, et cetera. Blacker. I forget what we were saying.
Okay.
You lead.
Okay, let's go to the New York Times on June 8th, and you're quoted in the lead story in the Week in Review talking about some candidates being too black. And what that means and the validity of the expression.
Oh, well, I was just saying that some people seem to think of it as an important point to say that Obama is the kind of black people white people are comfortable with.
Okay.
And I say, well, yeah, that's right. Like if you were looking at how history was going to unfold, if anybody was under the impression that somebody like Al Sharpton or Spike Lee was going to be the one, that's not the way history works. It's gradual. If somebody is looking for a black radical with the kind of anger and the chip on their shoulder about white people to become a presidential candidate, either that's never going to happen or we're in a transitional phase where that can only happen later. And so, yeah, I think trying to put myself in the minds of other people, which I'm told I do too much, but I'm always trying to, how does that person think? Kind of like what an actor might do.
Sure.
And I think if I were white at this point, I would be really tired of a certain kind of black thought. I would be tired of being abused for being a racist when I felt like I wasn't one. And I would like a black person who looked like they wanted to get past that. That doesn't mean that they have to have no black cultural characteristics at all. But none of the I hate you, none of the you owe me a debt, none of that. That's the sort of person I would be waiting for. And I think that is what created Iowa.
Okay. You've said that those who say that America is getting past race, which you've done, are not Pollyannas. We're in a post-Pollyanna era with race here?
We have to always think about degree.
Okay.
And so if one pretends that the way social change happens is a matter of a binary flip. So there's racism now, and then doink, there's no racism now. That's an interesting model. I'm not aware of any instances of that.
How you transition.
It's gradual.
Right. Okay.
And so we have some racism, and so right here in this city, but the question is how much.
Right.
And I think we're at a point, and this includes interactions between young black men and the police. If you actually look at each interaction, talk about racism, look at those interactions in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s.
Right.
That's changing. These things are hideous, but the days when it's just a matter of racists going and beating up some black man because they had a badge, that is largely gone. And I think that we're in an era when it is no longer worth the attention that we pay to it. And so we have to pay some attention.
Okay.
But when people in Iowa are trying to make Barack Obama president, and he's on the cover of Vanity Fair, and he very well may end up in, despite the fact that he is blacker than Colin Powell, yes, we can say it culturally, the fact that he is a real black man, this is important. And it's interesting to me that some people almost seem to not want to admit that. I think that hypothetically, if you did a thought experiment,
these folks?
Frankly, anybody who bristles a little bit when someone like me writes that we're getting past race, if that creates any feeling of anger or suspicion, then I think if you could wave a magic wand and suddenly there really was no racism, I think those people would need some therapy. I think it would, for at least 6 months.
Okay.
They wouldn't know where to grab on. And I guess that's a natural aspect of how things change. We are getting past it.
Okay. You've characterized American politics as juice and cookies politics. And in another piece, you talked about finding racism as a sport. And you argued that politics is hardball, and that there was much less racism in the primary than it was made out to be, particularly vis-a-vis some of Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton's remarks. Do we have juice and cookies politics, and is Obama benefiting sort of from this juice and cookies politics?
You know, I'm surprised how little that has affected how people have treated Obama, because one prediction I made, which was wrong 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, was I thought that people were going to kind of keep off him because they didn't want to be accused of being racist. I thought that would include Republicans. And actually, that has not really been true. And it seems that whenever somebody lobs something at Obama, and big surprise, sometimes whatever that thing lobbed is going to have something to do with color and race and culture, then I think people think of Obama as like Tweety Bird. They think of him as this newly hatched thing with big eyes and a high voice who really just can't take being hurt too much. And the reason they think that is partly, I think, because he's skinny and has a big toothy smile. I think there are visceral impressions like that. And I think it's also because he's not white. He's a color. And people think that somehow it's uncharitable to really throw it at him. And look, he can take it. And I think that really we're seeing that a black person can have crummy stuff thrown at them. And yes, in this society, crummy is going to be by definition sometimes racial.
Right.
And yet he's still standing there and the world still keeps spinning. And it doesn't mean that the Ku Klux Klan is coming up from behind the hill feeling a license now to start lynching people again. I think that politics is hardball, and for black people, hardball is going to mean things like, are you a Muslim, etc.
Right.
Now, that said, very briefly, I think that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton were repeatedly athletically misinterpreted. I don't think that anything they did was racially cynical. There are people who want them to have said such things. But then there are other comments that have been.
And that leads to your remark that finding racism is a sport, if you will.
It is. It's really, and this is not my old line about people lining their pockets, nothing like that.
Right.
Most of the people who do this seem quite sincere to me. But the idea is to sniff it out and making arguments that often are increasingly fragile. And it's just very simple. I don't think racism is the main problem that poor black people have today. It's one of them. But in terms of helping poor black people help each other, and at the Manhattan Institute, that's what we/I are committed to doing, not just throwing around ideological points. We're about programs. You know, the Manhattan Institute is working very closely with Cory Booker right now, and I was not told to say this, Cory Booker right now on prisoner reentry programs.
Right.
That's what I talk about when I go to work.
Yeah,
and so the point being that if you're trying to help poor black people, I don't see how the racism obsession is the main issue anymore.
Okay.
And I'm afraid that I cannot accept that that's a cynical or controversial statement.
Okay. Talking about Cory Booker, is Cory Booker of the same impact thinking, reaction to is Obama? Is he of a kind with Obama?
Yes, he's the same thing. He's a
obviously.
different individual.
Sure.
They're cut from a mold. We will see books where he and Obama and a couple of other people, Adrian Fenty down in D.C., are linked together as a sign of a new kind of post-racial candidate of race. And Cory Booker is every bit as exciting as Obama.
But also Ivy and elite educated at the same time.
Questions about whether or not he's really black, running up against an old guard and darker skinned opponent at first and then winning. Same sort of story. It'll be interesting to see who Cory Booker happens to marry so the press can kick her around too. And it's they're very similar stories, and I think we're going to see great things from both of those people. The ideal would be, just like Obama getting in and teaching a whole young generation that you can have a black president, Booker actually turning Newark around would be really exciting, because the way he'd do it would be not by railing against the white power structure, but by making it work.
Changing the system. Yeah. Right, making it work.
And I think
starting with the cops, for example, and crime.
Police.
You got to change that.
You have to change the crime, and you also, prisoner reentry. 1,500 ex-cons coming into Newark every year. What do you do with those people?
Right.
They need help. And so working on that. That's a major. You can go to Newark and just walking around downtown, get out of the PATH train, just walking around. I have never seen, and I grew up in big dirty cities like Philadelphia, so many people who need help just walking down the street.
Right.
And so
and you don't have to walk far when you get off the PATH train.
No,
to begin seeing
you
that.
just,
Out of that
right
downtown
there.
core, you're right there.
It's like urban disaster.
Right.
And so if somebody could make life better for people there, I would. I don't know how far Cory Booker could go. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to All About the Beat. Central thesis is, and again, you take on sort of a counter-conventional wisdom, that hip-hop is in some sense politically meaningful. There are caveats right at the beginning, what the book is not about. It's not about that rap spin. It's not about this. What is it? What's the thesis here? What's the argument? I mean, you began alluding to it in the top of the show. Talk about that.
I don't want people to listen to the attitude behind even the more political hip-hop and think that that's deep. I don't want people to think that that's the way out of the morass that we're in. And the reason that I don't want people to think that is not because I'm starchy and reserved and I don't like listening to black English set over a beat by blacker men than me. It's not that. It's that I want people to pay attention to real stuff.
Right. And you intersperse the book with vignettes of successful programs.
Of real stuff.
Right.
And I should say I do that repeatedly. That's really my point.
Right.
The whole book is really a proxy argument for one about black politics in general, which is what really interests me more than hip hop. And I used, in my first race book, the one that kind of got around, Losing the Race, I think I mentioned rap one time. And I mentioned Tupac Shakur twice, I think.
Right.
I didn't know I was supposed to address this music. I thought that was just music.
Come on. And you're a commentator.
And then I realized, if I'm actually going to be in this for the long haul, I have to say something about this music.
Right.
I wrote an article in 2003. It was a long, sad story. It was edited beyond recognition.
Please.
And it doesn't say what I really want to say. And so this book
Does this book say it?
This book says it. So I'm responsible for everything that's in this book. I'm responsible for the 2003 article because I let it get out there. I was learning.
Right.
But this one, I think, displays more of what I really think about the music. And I just feel that there's a certain kind of person who's getting distracted. There is this groaning bookshelf, these smart scholars writing about this music as if it's this post-civil rights ideological beacon. I want them to work on something else.
Okay, I mean, here I'm talking about a late middle-aged white guy reading the book, but having listened to the music throughout my kid's childhood, I don't get it. I mean, and I guess that's part of the problem is the generational differences that some of us don't get it. I mean, particularly us middle-aged white guys don't get the music. Right. I don't get it in terms of the attraction of the music. I mean, you apparently like the music. I like some of the remixing and what that means in terms of technique. But the basic beat, it's boring.
Really?
Yeah.
It doesn't just kind of lift
Why do you like rap and hip hop?
There's something about that beat. You know, I think it's the most incredible syncopation, to put it in a boring way, that has ever existed. It lifts you. What those producers do with the rhythm alone, and then what's set over it. And actually, the more modern it gets, the richer it gets in terms of the music.
Right.
And there are a lot of very clever rhymes. You have to listen closely, but there are a lot of very clever rhymes. It grows on you. It's kind of like, it's the same as classical music. I don't know about you, but like,
Go ahead.
For many
Convince me of
classical
this.
fans,
Go ahead.
if you listen to a Brahms symphony.
Go ahead.
First time, it's kind of boring. You know, unless you've got a really special ear, you're listening to these themes just kind of going by. I have to listen to something classical about 5 or 6 times before I get it. And then, boy, do I get it. With a lot of hip-hop, you can't just listen once. You have to get it over and over and over again, like the teenagers.
Oh, well, I
do.
guess that's the difference.
And you don't want to
blacker
spend,
than I am.
I
mean, come
suppose.
on. Because it just seemed to me that the music. I mean, you make the case that the music itself, melodically and rhythmically, is very interesting.
Yeah.
Some of us don't find it, but that's a different case altogether. You argue that essentially hip hop is acting out rather than acting for.
That is right.
And do you? And clearly there are academics that you take issue with. What's the future of sort of black music and its message?
It's going to be just like it is now. I mean, I might lack imagination, but talk about trying to think historically. The music is intensely popular, and it is good music, and so it's going to stay the way it is. Some things may shift in terms of substrate, but it's going to be confrontational and spiky, and maybe musically it'll get richer even more than it is now, but it's going to be there.
But the message is still there, and it's not a message of political activism.
Even if it's about politics, even if it takes pot shots at the president, it will not be truly constructive.
Okay. 20 seconds.
Wow.
Your reasons for hope.
My reasons for hope are, right now, locally, that we may have a black family in the White House for probably 8 years. And I think it would teach a young generation that race is no longer the defining factor in a black person's existence, and it's no longer America's main stain. And those people would become grown-ups, and then they would get old, and I think we would really be where we need to be.
Excellent. You coming back after the election for a post-mortem?
I'll be right in here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
John. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.